joined by 2017 LVO champion Alex Harrison. Thanks so much for joining us, mate. Appreciate it. I want to say, technically the only non-US based player to win the LVO to date, still the only foreigner to take the trophy home. That's pretty cool for a starting point.
Yeah, thank you. Wasn't actually aware of that until right now.
Well, I'm glad I've been able to help you out. So I want to let's start with that. You winning the title. You were playing Sean Naden in the final, so he's a pretty big name. Was a pretty big name then. I mean, he's a champion of the LVO himself. So when you're approaching a game like that, when you're going up against a Sean Naden in the final of the LVO, how were you feeling going into that game? Can you remember?
I was. I know I was very tired. It was the first major event I've ever been to, that long, that big. It obviously over the pond for us at the time. Those type of events were massive, in comparison to what we had in the UK. That's a bit different now. We have plenty of large events, but back in 2017, that was huge. So I was very tired and nervous, of course, because at the time, and it still is probably one of the, if not the biggest event in the world. I was quite nervous, and going up against Sean, he's a great guy, great player. I knew it was going to be a tough game.
Yeah, tell me about the army you took. I mean, we're talking about seventh edition, right? We were talking about seventh
Yeah.
edition, and I feel like the previous couple of years, there's just been Death Stars all over the place, all these mad lists. People take mad lists to the LVO and then end up doing great with them. So what did you have? What did you take?
So I'm going from memory here, but I recall it was the Warp Spider list, and it was something like 45 Warp Spiders, all MSU squads of 5.
Right.
And there was a Wraith Knight because they were awesome back then. Actually, it was a Scathach Wraith Knight, so it was something a bit different, which I know took people by surprise. It was a Forge World one. And what else? Obviously, some characters. I think I had like MSU jet bike units, like 3 squads of 3 or something like that.
Right.
And then there was like 2 single D cannons. And I believe that was it. Again, I'm going from memory here, but yeah, it was quite an MSU shooty army that had a very interesting mechanic. So the way Warp Spiders worked back then is whenever they got targeted, they could make a move. And I believe the ITC ruled that you can only move them once. So a lot of people before the event were sort of put off them because they became quite a big deal after the WTC, which was a few months before the LVO at the time. I believe the Swedish team took something like 60 Warp Spiders and caught everyone by surprise, and everyone was like, "Jesus, these are crazy good."
Yeah.
So yeah, that became a thing in the UK, and I don't believe it became a thing in the US until after the LVO. I know some people using it, but it wasn't really a big hit over there because they didn't follow the WTC at the time. I think that was the list, and obviously just with the one jump. The jump move that they could use when being targeted was more than enough to reposition the units into such a good position with the terrain that the LVO was using, these box terrains where you can jump from one wall to the other and then you're just hidden. And it was very frustrating to play for some people. So, yeah.
You've kind of touched on already. It's a really different world now because everything's out there on the internet. We're seeing battle reports and streams all the time of games that happen around the world. So there's a lot less of that massive difference between the UK meta and the US meta. There's a lot more alignment now. And you guys in the UK have just a massive tournament almost every month. You've got super majors all year round. So do you think that will impact the players this year coming to the LVO? There's a pretty big contingent of people from Europe and the UK. Will that help all the big games that you get to play now?
Oh yeah, massively. It's definitely changed the whole tournament scene across the world. Probably since COVID, when the world was locked down, a lot of people started playing on TTS, Tabletop Simulator. So all the different regions and countries sort of came together and started sharing list ideas on Discord and things like that. And it was great for the community. It just built from that. And as you say, with the large tournaments that we have, but I would actually say that pretty much everywhere has a large tournament now. Yes, obviously the UK has pretty much one every month, which is brilliant, and it helps our scene. But due to the community and all the blogs, websites, YouTube channels that cover all these events as well now, I think that every country has their own sort of meta covered. There's not too much difference like it used to. So yeah, I don't think anything's going to really catch people off guard. This LVO will be interesting. I think if you're curious, the three armies that are going to do really well, especially with it being the old FAQ and pre-balanced data slate, will most likely you'll see Thousand Suns with Flamers, Tau, and Harlequins with a sprinkle of Botan as well. I think those four armies are going to be up the top. So I know some of the English guys going, great players like Vic and David Gaylard, and the others. I think Nassim is going as well. Some of which came from the TTS scene as well. Ever since COVID, new players to our scene as well, doing really well. They're going to do really well as well. So there's plenty of Europeans and Americans there that will have a chance at it, but I think this year might be another year where a non-American might win it.
Yeah, well, actually, funny I was going to ask you about the specifically those guys because Vic and David, who technically is a New Zealander but living in the UK.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So Vic and David bringing Thousand Sons with Flamers. You've got Mike Porter as well with Harlequins. I'm assuming he's listed Harlequins as his army, and he's got a win rate of basically
95%
so,
or something.
Yeah, it's crazy. So those three and Nassim, do you see a dark horse army or a dark horse player coming through into that final 8 or final 16? Is there anyone that you think could surprise?
To be honest, if it was the new rules, perhaps, but with the old rules, I don't know. I actually don't know whether the top American players are all going and what they're taking. I've not actually looked at it because I've been so busy over the last few weeks. I've not actually looked at the lists. I'd actually root for probably one of the British guys to take it. I'd probably say Mike's got a good chance, but I don't know whether Harlequins can pip the Thousand Sons army consistently because the Thousand Sons army has so many tools to deal with the Harlequins. It's all going to be down to rock, paper, scissors at the top end. I think all four of those players that we've mentioned will likely make all four of them make the top cut. I'd say 3 out of 4 will make the top cut. I don't want to say which ones because one of them is definitely going to message me saying, why didn't you pick me? So, but I think 3 out of the 4 will. And then whether one of them takes it, yeah, I think so. But it's going to be one of those armies, definitely. The Thousand Flamers is super strong. I played it at one team event, because no one else had the models at the time. And I didn't really know what I was doing with the army, and it was still really strong. And you could see that after a few games, as I learnt the army, it just became stronger and stronger. It has all the tools for any situation. Tower is going to be very interesting and catch some armies off guard. There's obviously with the player-plays terrain, you can position them away from the objective markers. So if your opponent wants to push your side of the board, they're going to be in the open. And I know when I played at the Beachhead Brawl last year, it was a 220-player event. I played with Tau when they first came out, and it was ridiculous. Okay, they were a lot stronger then. But my games are over in 2 or 3 turns. But this year, maybe not 2 or 3 turns because obviously they're not as strong. But being able to position terrain pieces where you need your Riptides to get really good firing angles, or your Crisis Suits, or even the Bombers, it's going to be really tough for some people to deal with because I don't think anyone's going to really super expect them. So that'll be interesting. And then, of course, you've got Votan who do a similar role. And they're super strong as well. So it's going to be difficult to really say which army is going to do well.
Yeah, I want to think that this year's, I mean, LVOs are always like this, but this year's LVO, maybe even more than most, is kind of wide open because there are so many armies kind of at the top. There's not like 1 or 2 just busted armies. There are a bunch of armies that could do well and a bunch of players that are performing really well at the moment. So, we'll just have to wait and see, man.
It's going to be really interesting, and I'll be following it from here, rooting for obviously my guys. But there's some American players that are good friends of mine as well that I'll be rooting for, and I'm sure they'll all do great and have a good time.
Awesome. Hey, great to talk to you, mate. Thank you so much for making the time to catch up. Really appreciate it, and all the best for the little break you're going to have.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.